Why are you in my bakery? Ava's voice cut through the room as she raised the brass key above the flour-covered table. Marcus Reed froze with both hands pressed into a mound of dough. At the glass door stood Claire Monroe, the CEO who had fired him, one hand still on the handle while her daughter tugged her sleeve and pointed at the stained recipe card beside the register. "Mom," Lily whispered. "Your company has his purple star." Claire reached for her tablet. "That doesn't prove anything." 3 hours earlier, the bakery had been silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and one loose vent above the sink clicking every 11 seconds. Marcus noticed the rhythm because bakers noticed repetition. A second too long could flatten dough. A degree too high could turn sweetness bitter. A mistake ignored could become somebody else's emergency. He stood alone in Reed and Rise, wearing a navy work shirt beneath a brown canvas apron, checking the temperature of the restored oven for the 4th time. The old place still carried traces of its former life. Vanilla caught in the wooden shelves, scorched sugar beneath the metal racks, and a faint citrus cleaner Rosa Alvarez had used for nearly 30 years. On the counter lay the recipe card Marcus had kept through everything: the firing, the months without insurance, the nights he pretended not to be hungry so Ava could finish dinner. Its edges were soft with age. Flour sat inside the creases. A purple star sticker covered one corner where Ava had torn it when she was 7. Marcus slid the card farther from the sink before a drop of water could reach it. Behind him, small sneakers tapped across the tile. Ava entered carrying the brass key with both hands, though Marcus had already told her 3 times not to swing it near the display glass. "Can I open the door?" she asked. "When Rosa gets here. It's our bakery. That means we take care of it. It doesn't mean we rush it." Ava placed the key on the table, then carefully straightened the handwritten price cards beside the pastry case. She had drawn tiny suns beside the cinnamon rolls and a crooked crown beside the honey-fold bread. Marcus noticed she had written her mother's favorite phrase beneath the register in pencil: "Make room for something good." He did not erase it. Outside, the neighborhood slowly woke. A city bus sighed at the corner. Jamal's delivery truck rolled past, horn chirping once. Across the street, a man in a gray coat photographed the bakery window, then lowered his phone when Marcus looked up. Marcus held the stranger's gaze for one beat. The man smiled politely, as if he had only been checking the weather, and walked away. Rosa arrived with a red scarf around her silver hair and tears already bright in her eyes. She kissed Ava's forehead, inspected the oven, and complained that Marcus had polished the old mixer so thoroughly it no longer looked honest. By 8, the display case glowed with warm bread, glazed pastries, and the honeyfold cakes children at Ava's school had begun asking about. Marcus kept one cake aside for the school fundraiser, marking the box with Ava's name. When she asked whether they would finally be safe now, he tightened the string around the box before answering. "Today we open the door. Tomorrow we earn the next day." At 9, Rosa lifted her phone to take the picture. Ava stood beside the flour-covered table and raised the brass key like a medal. Marcus smiled despite himself. Then the bell above the door rang. Claire Monroe stepped inside with Lily, dressed not like a CEO entering a boardroom, but like a mother who had promised her daughter a Saturday treat. Her smile disappeared when she saw Marcus. His hands stopped in the dough. Claire's eyes moved from his face to the bakery sign, then to Ava holding the key. Lily pulled her mother toward the counter, excited by the honeyfold cake, and brushed the edge of the tablet tucked beneath Claire's arm. Its screen woke on a Monroe Foods launch presentation. Marcus saw Brent Miller's name beneath a photograph of the company's best-selling pastry. The picture had been tightly cropped, but not tightly enough. In the bottom corner, beneath Brent's polished title, was the torn edge of a purple star. Claire's thumb stopped over the cropped photograph. "That star proves nothing. It was on his card first," Lily said. "Sweetheart, let the adults talk." Morning light slid across the tablet screen, catching the polished title beneath Brent Miller's name. Marcus said nothing, but his flour-covered fingers tightened against the edge of the counter when he noticed Claire enlarge the image instead of closing it. 14 months earlier, the same recipe had been buried beneath a red folder in a glass conference room at Monroe Foods. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Burnt sugar and industrial cleaner clung to the air. Brent stood at the end of the table in a charcoal suit, one hand resting beside a blackened tray of honeyfold pastries as though he were presenting evidence in court. The school order was nearly released. I stopped it before shipping. After the damage was done. Marcus remained standing because no one had offered him a chair. His navy work shirt carried a pale stripe of flour across one shoulder, and the cuffs were still damp from washing down the production line. Through the glass wall, two supervisors watched without looking directly at him. One leaned toward the other and whispered something that ended with the words "single father." Then both men turned away when Marcus glanced over. Susan Blake opened the red folder with careful hands. Her cream blouse was spotless, her voice soft enough to sound compassionate. "Marcus, we understand you've been under considerable personal strain. My daughter has nothing to do with that oven." No one said she did. The pages whispered beneath Susan's fingers. 3 disciplinary notices sat on top, each carrying a digital signature that looked like Marcus's name but leaned too sharply to the right. Marcus had never seen 2 of them. Claire sat near the window with a silver pen between her fingers, while Charles Whitmore waited on a muted video screen for the investment meeting scheduled immediately afterward. "I sent a warning about the heat sensor," Marcus said. "There is no warning in the system," Susan replied. "Then pull the maintenance request." Brent gave a patient sigh, the kind used on someone assumed not to understand how business worked. "We inspected the oven. The equipment was operational. The problem was procedure." Marcus reached into his metal toolbox and removed a thin orange carbon copy, creased twice down the middle. At the top was the number of the production oven. Beneath it, in his handwriting, were the words "temperature drift after second cycle." Susan did not pick it up. She merely looked at Brent, who smiled with professional regret. "A handwritten slip cannot override the digital record. It can tell you where to look. We have looked." The room settled into a silence broken only by the vent clicking above the ceiling tiles. Marcus turned toward Claire, not pleading, only waiting for the person with the highest authority to ask one more question. Claire glanced at the tray, the folder and the clock counting down to Charles's meeting. "Was the school notified?" she asked. "I called their kitchen manager myself," Marcus said. Brent's jaw shifted. "Without authorization. Children were going to eat them." Susan folded her hands over the folder. "Your intentions may have been good, Marcus, but repeated refusal to follow reporting lines creates its own safety risk." She slid a severance agreement across the table. The amount printed at the bottom could have covered several months of rent, Ava's dental bill, and the insurance Marcus had been afraid to lose. In return, he would waive all claims concerning product development, workplace records, and intellectual property. "Sign today," Susan said, "and we can help your family move forward quietly." Marcus read every line. Then he placed the silver pen back in front of Claire. "You can take my badge. You don't get to purchase my silence." Brent's pleasant expression held, but a pulse moved once in his temple. Your 11-minute rest was slowing the line anyway. Marcus looked up. The vent clicked again. That number had never appeared in any official company formula. It existed only on the flour-stained card he kept inside his workstation drawer. Security escorted him to the production floor while workers lowered their eyes and continued measuring dough. At the exit, Marcus used his final minute of access to call the school again and confirm the shipment remained quarantined. Then his badge flashed red, and the door locked. Behind him, through the glass, he saw Susan walk to his abandoned station, remove a small black drive from her pocket and plug it into the computer beneath his desk. Back inside Read and Rise, Claire's thumb hovered over Brent's launch slide as Marcus watched her eyes move from the torn purple star to the recipe card beside the register. For the first time, she seemed to hear Brent's old words differently. How had he known about the 11 minutes? Claire kept staring at the 11-minute note when Lily reached for the last honeyfold cake. Her sleeve caught the edge of the paper tray. The cake struck the tile and split beneath the display case. Lily's face emptied of color.
"I'm sorry."
"It was an accident," Claire said quickly. "I'll pay for it." The bakery had gone quiet enough for Marcus to hear the loose vent click above the sink. Lily stood with both hands pressed against her coat, staring at the broken glaze as if she had damaged something much larger than a pastry. Claire opened her wallet and placed 3 crisp bills on the counter. Marcus did not touch them. He came around the display case, lowered himself onto one knee and handed Lily a folded towel. "Are you burned?" Lily shook her head. "Did the tray cut you?" Another shake. Marcus picked up the largest pieces before anyone could step on them. "Then we can fix what matters." Claire pushed the money closer. "Please, take it. The cake cost $6. I know what it cost." Marcus looked toward the nearly empty case, then at the light bill tucked beneath the register. Its red due date showed through the thin envelope. "So do I." He returned the bills to her without judgment. Children don't inherit the mistakes adults make. Claire's fingers closed slowly around the money. Ava watched from beside the flower table, her expression caught between pride and worry. She knew there was no second batch waiting in the kitchen. The final portion of dough sat beneath a clean towel, reserved for the school fundraiser that afternoon. Marcus lifted the towel anyway. "Dad," Ava said softly, "that's the fundraiser dough." "I know. Ms. Carter said they need 12. Then we'll start another batch after lunch." Ava looked toward the old mixer, then at the electric bill. She was 9, but she understood the careful way her father counted eggs and turned off lights in empty rooms. Marcus did not explain. He set the dough on the wooden table and divided it with the bench scraper. Lily remained near her mother until Marcus placed a small piece in front of her. "You can help shape the replacement," he said. "Only if you want to." Lily glanced at Claire. Claire gave a small nod. Ava opened the drawer beneath the counter and took out her favorite cutter, a little metal sun with one bent ray. She hesitated before placing it beside Lily's hand. "Press straight down," Ava said. "Don't twist, or the edges get weird." Lily copied her carefully. Flour dusted both girls' fingertips. Marcus kept the hot tray beyond their reach and moved the scraper away each time they leaned forward. He did not turn the moment into a lesson about forgiveness. He simply gave Lily another piece when the first one tore. While clearing the fallen cake, Marcus noticed a streak of glaze had reached the recipe card. He lifted it by the dry corner, wiped the clear sleeve with a clean cloth and turned the card over to check for moisture. Claire saw the faded handwriting on the back. For Marcus, the words were familiar enough to hurt without warning. "First full batch at Rose's oven. You finally stopped rushing the second fold. Proud of you." Beneath the sentence was his late wife's initial and a date nearly 2 years before Monroe Foods launched the Honeyfold line. Marcus's thumb rested over the writing for one quiet second. Then he slid the card into a fresh food-safe sleeve. "Was that written before you worked for us?" Claire asked. "Before your company sold the first one. Can anyone verify the date?" Marcus looked toward Rosa, who was helping a customer near the window, but he did not call her over. Verification should come before belief. Lily pressed the sun cutter into the new dough. Ava carefully lifted the shape onto parchment, protecting it with both palms as if carrying something fragile. Claire watched Marcus brush flour from the girl's sleeves before checking the oven temperature twice. He had lost part of the fundraiser batch, refused extra money, and protected Lily from embarrassment in the same room where he had every reason to make Claire uncomfortable. None of it matched the personnel file Susan had written. Claire opened the Monroe Foods archive on her tablet. A message from Brent appeared almost immediately. "Do not discuss proprietary recipes with Reed. He has a history of unstable claims." Claire's eyes narrowed. She had not told Brent where she was, and she had not mentioned Marcus. A second notification arrived from Susan. "Secure the card if possible. It may contain stolen company property." Marcus saw Claire's expression change but did not ask to read her screen. Instead, he wrote the time and date on the new sleeve, then set the card where both of them could see it. "It should be copied by someone neither of us controls," Claire said. "Agreed. I can arrange custody through company counsel." "Independent counsel," Marcus replied. Both sides received the same scan, the same receipt and the same access log. Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded. You don't trust me. Marcus slid the replacement cake into the oven and closed the door gently. Trust isn't the first step. A clean record is. Claire submitted an order preserving every version of the company recipe. The tablet spun for several seconds, then rejected her credentials. Across the screen appeared a cold gray notice. File moved to legal restriction. Someone inside Monroe Foods had locked the evidence less than 3 minutes after Marcus chose to protect a frightened child instead of humiliating her. The gray notice remained on Claire's tablet while the replacement cake rose behind the oven glass. Legal restriction? Marcus asked. It can happen automatically, Claire said. Not 3 minutes after you open the file. The vent clicked above the sink, steady and indifferent. Claire looked from the locked screen to the recipe card sealed inside its clear sleeve, then turned the tablet face down as if removing it from sight might slow whoever was watching. Her phone rang before she could speak. Susan Blake's name appeared across the display. Claire answered on speaker. Why was I locked out of the Honeyfold archive? A routine safeguard, Susan replied. Her voice was warm, professional, and almost soothing. The system detected access involving a former employee with an unresolved intellectual property dispute. There was no dispute until today. Marcus Reed has made unsupported claims before. Marcus stood near the oven with one hand resting on the metal handle. He did not interrupt. Claire's eyes moved toward him, measuring the calmness that Susan's file had described as hostility held in reserve. How did you know I was with Marcus? Claire asked. A brief silence passed through the speaker. Your login location was flagged. And how did Brent know about the card? He assumed Mr. Reed might still possess company materials. He mentioned the purple star, Claire said. I never entered that into the system. Susan's answer came half a second too late. I may have misunderstood your question. Marcus looked at the sealed card. Ask her what time the restriction was placed. Claire repeated the question. Susan said 9:17. The tablet's notice showed 9:14. It was only 3 minutes, small enough to dismiss as a delayed system clock. But Claire stopped tapping her pen against the counter. Do not move the card, Susan continued. Company counsel should collect it immediately. Independent counsel will collect it, Claire said. That would be unnecessary and expensive. So was firing the wrong person. Susan did not answer. Claire ended the call and stood in the quiet warmth of the bakery, her face controlled but no longer certain. She had years of signed reports, audit summaries, and legal reviews supporting Brent's ownership claim. Marcus had a stained card, an old memory, and a date written by his late wife. Fair doubt did not disappear because he had been kind to Lily, but fair doubt also required that the company's evidence survive inspection. By noon, an independent document examiner arrived with a portable scanner, cotton gloves, and tamper-evident bags. Rosa closed the side table to customers while the examiner photographed every edge of the card beneath white light. Flour had settled deep into the paper fibers. The purple star was faded at the points, and one corner had been torn long enough for the exposed paper to darken. Lily watched from beside Claire. It was already torn in Mom's picture, she said. Claire crouched beside her. What picture? The one from the launch. I asked why there was a sticker on a business slide. It was the kind of small thing a child remembered because adults had ignored it. Claire did not ask her anything else. She opened the oldest company version that legal counsel could still access through a backup portal. Marcus stayed on the other side of the table. You should look first, he said. Why? Because if I point to it, you'll wonder whether I led you there. Claire enlarged the document. The examiner placed the scan beside it. Both showed the 11-minute rest. Both used the same unusual order for the second fold. Then Marcus asked one question. How many people misspell the same word in the same place? Claire leaned closer. On the card, temperature had been written as temperatu. The company version carried the identical error, followed by the same short dash after the honey ratio. The room did not erupt. Rosa's refrigerator continued humming. A paper bag crackled in a customer's hand near the window. Claire simply stopped breathing for one beat. A copied typo still doesn't prove when this was written, she said.
No, Marcus replied.
That is why the date needs a witness. Rosa went to the cabinet beneath the register and returned with an old community center flyer. The paper had softened along the folds. On the back was a printed photograph from a neighborhood fundraiser nearly 2 years before Monroe Foods launched the product. Marcus stood beside a younger Ava, holding a tray of the same honeyfold cakes. In his left hand was the recipe card, its purple star already torn at the corner. Claire examined the public event date printed beneath the image. A photograph proves the card existed, she said carefully. It doesn't prove the writing inside never changed. That's fair, Marcus answered. He did not push. The examiner logged the flyer, photographed its paper stock, and requested the original digital file from the community center. Meanwhile, Claire's outside forensic team reached the oldest server backup. At 2:13 in the morning, months after Marcus joined Monroe Foods, the first recipe file had been uploaded from the workstation assigned to him. At 8:06 the next morning, the author field changed from Marcus Reed to Brent Miller. Brent could still claim the workstation was shared. He could claim Marcus had entered company material under his own name. The evidence had shifted, but it had not closed the case. Then the forensic analyst called Claire. We found a deleted attachment linked to the author change, he said. What kind of attachment? A photograph taken on Brent Miller's company phone the night before the file was renamed. Claire looked at the torn purple star beneath the scanner light. The image had not yet been restored, but its thumbnail contained one visible detail: the edge of Marcus's recipe card lying open on his workstation. The restored thumbnail from Brent's phone was still loading when Jamal's delivery truck stopped outside Reed and Rise. Marcus heard the air brake sigh against the curb, then the rattle of a handcart crossing the sidewalk. Your flowers here, Jamal called. Same order as last week? Same order, Marcus answered. School safe batch. That's what the invoice says. The forensic analyst remained on Claire's speakerphone, explaining that the deleted photograph needed another hour to recover at full resolution. Claire asked him to preserve the original file, its metadata and every access record without notifying anyone inside Monroe Foods. Then Marcus looked through the bakery window and saw Jamal lift a white flour sack from the truck. He did not need special equipment to notice the problem. The blue security seal ended in 42. The delivery photograph on Jamal's tablet ended in 27. Marcus wiped his hands on his brown canvas apron and stepped away from the mixer. Don't bring that into the kitchen yet. Jamal stopped with the sack balanced against his shoulder. Something wrong. Maybe nothing. Then why are you looking at it like that? Sunlight caught the plastic seal, turning the stamp numbers bright against the loading door. Marcus took Jamal's tablet, enlarged the departure photograph, and placed it beside the sack without touching either seal. The numbers did not match. Claire moved closer but kept her hands behind her back. Could the warehouse have resealed it? She asked. Not without a replacement note, Jamal said. I'd have one on the route log. Marcus rolled an empty stainless steel cart into the side inspection area and asked Rosa to keep customers away from the rear door. He did not accuse Jamal. He did not call the police or announce sabotage. He photographed the seal, wrote down the time, and cut the sack open beneath the small exhaust hood used for allergen checks. A pale cloud of flour lifted into the light. Marcus leaned close enough to smell it, then immediately stepped back. Close the kitchen door. What is it? Claire asked. Almond. Jamal frowned. That bag says all-purpose flour. Marcus sealed the opening inside a food-safe liner and shut down the mixer. The low mechanical hum died, leaving only the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock. Ava appeared at the edge of the hallway, holding Lily's hand. Dad, stay with Rosa, Marcus said gently. Nothing is wrong with you. I just need the room clear. Ava nodded and pulled Lily back toward the front tables. Neither girl argued. Marcus checked the order sheet. The flour was intended for honeyfold cakes promised to Ava's school fundraiser, where 2 children had documented nut allergies. We can use another bag, Rosa said. Not until every sack from this delivery is isolated. Claire looked toward the nearly full display case. That means closing production. Yes. On opening day. Yes. Marcus called the school first. He canceled the order, explained that no contaminated food had left the bakery and promised a written report. Then he refunded 3 advance purchases and taped a plain paper notice to the front counter. Production paused for ingredient review. One customer sighed loudly and asked whether the new owner knew what he was doing. Marcus apologized for the inconvenience without defending himself. Claire watched the red past due electricity notice beneath the register flutter each time the door opened. This could cost you the week, she said. A full oven can be replaced, Marcus replied. A child's breath can't. The room went still for a moment. Even the customer who had complained lowered his eyes. Claire took out her phone and quietly contacted an independent food laboratory, instructing them to send a technician and preserve chain of custody documentation. She also texted her assistant to freeze all deletion permissions related to Marcus, Brent, Susan, and the Honeyfold line. Jamal reviewed his route footage on the truck's dashboard monitor. At 8:12 that morning, the sacks were intact. At 8:37, while he was inside a gas station, the rear camera recorded 4 minutes of movement beside the cargo door. The image was partially blocked by a delivery van, but a man in a gray maintenance jacket could be seen stepping between the vehicles. Claire's phone rang. Brent's name appeared. She answered without saying where she was. Claire, I heard Reed is staging another safety panic, he said. We should handle this privately before people misunderstand. Claire slowly placed her free hand on the sealed flour sample. Who told you there was a safety issue? A pause. Susan mentioned an unusual system alert. The lab hasn't received the sample yet. I'm only saying Marcus has a pattern of overreacting. You called it a safety panic, Claire said. You also knew it involved Marcus. Brent's voice remained smooth. I'm trying to protect the company. Claire ended the call without replying. 20 minutes later, the lab technician's preliminary test detected almond protein in the flour. It did not prove who had changed the seal or why, but it proved Marcus had not invented the danger. Jamal replayed the truck footage frame by frame until the man in the gray jacket turned slightly toward the camera. A white stitched logo appeared above his pocket. Jamal enlarged it. Claire recognized the name before Marcus said it aloud. The maintenance company belonged to Charles Whitmore. The white logo on the gray jacket belonged to Whitmore Property Services, the same company whose name appeared on the lease documents for Reed and Rise. Claire stared at the frozen frame on Jamal's monitor. Charles owns the contractor. He owns the parent company, Jamal said. Then this wasn't random, Marcus replied. The truck cab smelled of warm vinyl and spilled coffee. Outside, the independent lab technician sealed the contaminated flour sample while the bakery's mixer remained silent behind the glass. Claire enlarged the footage until the image broke into pale squares. The man's face stayed hidden, but the stitched logo and timestamp were clear. Marcus did not ask Claire to call the police or confront Charles. He asked Jamal to export the original recording, preserve the route data, and make 2 verified copies. One for you, Marcus said. One for the investigator. Jamal looked surprised. You don't want to keep it? I don't want anyone saying I changed it. Back inside, Rosa locked the front door and lowered the shade halfway. Afternoon light narrowed across the wooden counter, stopping at the sealed recipe card like a spotlight. Claire's forensic analyst called before anyone sat down. The deleted image from Brent's company phone had been restored. It showed Marcus's workstation 14 months earlier. The flour-stained recipe card lay open beside the keyboard, its purple star torn at the corner and the 11-minute instruction fully visible. The photograph had been taken at 10:46 p.m. The next morning, Brent uploaded the company recipe under his own name. That proves he had access, Claire said quietly. It does not prove every later act was coordinated. Marcus nodded. Then don't say more than it proves. He could have demanded that she call a press conference. He could have posted the image online and watched Brent's name burn before sunset. Instead, he asked the analyst to preserve the phone record device identifier, and full chain of custody. Revenge would have been faster. Truth had to survive lawyers. Rosa disappeared into the storage room and returned carrying a dented metal cash box. Inside were the old neighborhood fundraiser ledger, ingredient invoices, and a faded photograph of Marcus with his late wife beside the first tray of honeyfold cakes. Ava was younger in the picture, missing one front tooth, holding the same purple star sticker sheet against her chest. Marcus touched the photograph only at its edge. His wife's handwriting appeared in the ledger beside the trial batch date. Marcus finally stopped rushing the second fold. The date matched the note on the back of the recipe card and Jamal's old flour invoice. Claire laid the documents in a row without speaking. Then her assistant sent the archived maintenance records from Monroe Foods. The printer beside Rosa's register began feeding out page after page. Marcus's orange carbon request appeared first. Behind it was the technician's service log confirming the oven sensor drifted after the second heating cycle. The final line carried Brent Miller's signature beneath a decision to delay replacement until the quarterly shutdown. The printer stopped. The sudden silence felt heavier than the pages. Claire read the date again. It was 6 days before the Burn School order. "He knew," she said. "You warned them and he knew." Marcus looked toward Ava and Lily coloring pastry boxes near Rosa's office. "Knowing is not the same as proving who changed the records." Another file arrived. The server archive showed Marcus's warning email had entered the system at 6:42 a.m. Susan opened it at 7:03. At 7:19, it was exported manually to an external drive. At 7:26, it disappeared from the active mailbox. Susan had told the conference room it never existed. Claire's phone vibrated against the counter. Susan was calling. Claire answered but did not use speakerphone. "We should pause this review," Susan said, her voice still polished. "There are privacy concerns involving former staff." "How many former staff?" Claire asked. Silence. "I'm not sure what you mean. Send me every termination under Brent's operational authority for the last 3 years." Susan's breathing changed slightly. "That would create unnecessary alarm." "Send them." Claire ended the call. Within an hour, 12 personnel files appeared through outside counsel. The language repeated with unnatural precision. Failure to follow reporting lines, unstable response under pressure, safety concerns unsupported by available records. 5 employees had raised equipment or accounting complaints shortly before being dismissed. 3 had signed severance agreements containing the same intellectual property waiver offered to Marcus. 1 disciplinary notice in Marcus's own file carried a creation timestamp 2 days after his badge had been disabled. Claire lowered herself into Rosa's old chair. In the dark bakery window, her reflection hovered over the closed sign. "I signed 5 of these," she said. "Then help fix all 12, Marcus answered. "Not just mine." Claire looked at him. "You could clear your name tonight. And leave theirs buried?" He slid the files back toward her. "Don't use me to make the company look honest." Claire removed herself from control of the investigation and requested independent counsel appointed by the board. The decision placed her own conduct under review, but this time she read every line before signing. Then Rosa unfolded the current lease option for the building. A clause buried near the back gave Charles Whitmore the right to purchase the property below market value if the bakery received a health suspension before the end of the month. Claire placed the contract beside the contaminated flour report and the truck footage. The pattern was no longer small enough to contain inside read and rise. At that moment, someone taped a notice to the glass door. Charles Whitmore would arrive at 9 the next morning with a city inspector, the landlord's attorney, and local reporters. Beneath the notice was a handwritten line. "Prior employee safety history will be entered into the public record." Marcus looked at the red folder named in the notice, then at the sealed recipe card on the counter. By morning, the people who had erased his warning would try to use the same false record to close his bakery in front of the entire neighborhood. At 8:58 the next morning, Marcus unlocked Read and Rise with Ava's brass key and placed it beneath the framed opening day photograph, where everyone could see it. The bakery smelled of fresh coffee, cold metal, and the faint almond trace that still lingered inside the sealed evidence bin. Rosa stood near the back hallway with Ava and Lily, far from the ovens and the gathering cameras. Jamal waited beside the delivery entrance, holding the verified copy of his truck footage against his chest. Marcus looked tired. He had slept less than 2 hours, and flour clung to the seam of his brown apron. But when the city inspector stepped through the door, Marcus handed over the kitchen keys without hesitation. "Every surface is open," he said. "Every record, too." At 9, Charles Whitmore entered with the landlord's attorney, Brent Miller, Susan Blake, and 3 local reporters. Susan carried the red personnel folder against her cream coat. Brent wore a dark suit and the patient expression of a man arriving to correct someone else's misunderstanding. Charles smiled at the customers gathered along the windows. "No one wants to hurt a neighborhood business," he said. "This is about public safety." His voice was warm enough to sound protective. His eyes never left the lease documents on the counter. The inspector began with the refrigeration logs, allergen procedures, and cleaning records. Marcus answered each question in a few words and stepped aside whenever a cabinet needed opening. He did not mention the contaminated flour until the inspector reached the sealed bin. Then he produced the mismatched seal photographs, the laboratory report, and Jamal's route footage. The first shift in the room was small. A reporter stopped typing. The landlord's attorney lowered his pen. Charles folded his hands and said the contractor in the footage had no authority to act for him. "A uniform does not prove coordination," he said. "Mr. Reed is trying to turn a delivery irregularity into a conspiracy." For a moment the explanation held. The gray jacket was visible, but the man's face was not. No payment record had yet been presented. Charles's smile returned. Then Marcus asked the inspector to read the complaint number aloud. The inspector did. Marcus placed the intake log beside Charles's phone record. "What time was that number issued?" he asked. 8:41 yesterday morning," the inspector replied. "And what time did Mr. Whitmore's office call asking about it?" The inspector studied the page. A chair leg scraped once across the floor, then stopped. 8:26. Charles's smile tightened. "My staff may have been given a preliminary reference number." "By whom?" Marcus asked. Charles did not answer directly. Susan stepped forward and laid the red folder on the same flour-marked table where Ava had raised the key. "Whatever happened with the delivery," she said, "Mr. Reed's documented safety history remains relevant." She opened the folder to the 3 disciplinary notices and spoke about patterns, reporting failures, and emotional resistance to supervision. Her tone stayed gentle, almost regretful. Marcus did not defend himself with a speech. He placed his orange carbon maintenance request beside the folder. Claire entered before Susan could close it. She wore no company pin and carried no prepared statement. Beside her walked the independent attorney appointed by the Monroe Foods Board and a forensic auditor holding a locked evidence case. Claire did not stand next to Marcus. She remained near the wall, where she could see every face in the room. "Continue," she told Susan. Susan's composure returned. "Thank you. We also have proof that Mr. Reed transferred all rights connected to the Honeyfold formula while employed by Monroe Foods." She removed a notarized intellectual property agreement. Marcus's electronic signature appeared at the bottom. The document looked clean, official, and devastating. Brent glanced toward the reporters as if the matter had finally become simple. Even Claire's expression hardened with uncertainty. If the agreement was authentic, Marcus might prove he created the recipe and still own nothing. Charles leaned toward the inspector. "That should clarify the motive behind these accusations." Marcus studied the signature without touching the page. "When was it signed?" he asked. Susan answered immediately. "During his final week of employment." "Which day?" "The Wednesday before termination." Marcus looked at Claire. "My badge was disabled Monday night." Susan's fingers tightened on the folder. Remote access remained available for administrative completion. Not according to the account closure notice. Marcus placed that notice beside the transfer. He still did not call Susan a liar. "Check the device." Before the auditor could open the evidence case, Brent stepped closer to the sealed recipe card. "This entire performance is unnecessary," he said. "That 11-minute note proves Reed copied our process and built a story around it." The bakery went still. The recipe card had not been removed from its tamper-evident sleeve. No one at the inspection had read the note aloud. Claire turned slowly toward Brent. "How do you know what is written inside that sleeve?" Brent blinked once. Susan answered for him. "It was included in his personnel materials." The independent attorney opened the official inventory attached to Marcus's file. There was no recipe card, no photograph, and no 11-minute notation. Marcus rested one hand on the counter. "I'm not here to bury anyone," he said. "I'm here because the truth was buried once already." The auditor set the locked case beneath the bakery lights and entered the code. Inside were the restored photograph from Brent's phone, the server history, Susan's external drive log, and the forensic report on Marcus's electronic signature. The final file had not yet been displayed when Claire placed her silver pen beside the red folder and said, "Open it where everyone can see." The auditor opened the final file on the wall screen. A timestamp appeared first, 11:48 p.m., 3 days after Marcus Reed's employee account had been disabled. "That cannot be right," Susan said. No one answered. The projector fan hummed above the bakery's refrigerator, and the forged intellectual property agreement filled the white wall behind the flour-covered counter. The forensic report showed Marcus's electronic signature had not come from his account, his phone, or any device assigned to him. It had been inserted from Susan Blake's office computer using a signature image taken from his health insurance enrollment form. Susan's hand loosened around the red folder. Several pages slid onto the floor. "Administrative staff sometimes complete delayed documents," she said, but her voice had dried to a whisper. "Not after the employee has refused the agreement," the independent attorney replied, "and not by copying a medical record signature." Claire stood motionless, beside her silver pen. The auditor moved to the next exhibit. Brent's restored phone photograph appeared on the screen, showing Marcus's original recipe card open on his workstation at 10:46 p.m. The torn purple star was visible. So was the misspelled word, the honey ratio dash, and the 11-minute instruction Brent had somehow known before the evidence sleeve was opened. The server history followed. At 2:13 the next morning, the formula had been uploaded from Marcus's workstation. At 8:06, the author field changed from Marcus Reed to Brent Miller. Brent stared at the screen without blinking. "He could have entered company work under his own name," he said. Marcus placed the orange maintenance copy beside the red folder. "Then show them the oven record." The auditor displayed the service log. The sensor drift had been confirmed 6 days before the failed school order. Brent's signature sat beneath the decision to delay repairs until the quarterly shutdown. Marcus's warning email appeared next, followed by the access trail showing Susan opened it, exported it to an external drive, and deleted it before the meeting where she claimed it had never existed. Brent's mouth opened, but Claire raised one hand. "Let the record continue." Jamal's truck footage played on the wall. The gray-jacketed contractor stepped between the vehicles and reached the rear cargo door. The laboratory report confirmed almond protein inside the resealed flour sack. Then the complaint intake log appeared beside the phone record from Charles Whitmore's office. His staff had asked about the complaint number 15 minutes before the city system issued it. Charles adjusted his cuff. "A contractor acting without instructions does not establish my involvement." The auditor brought up the reimbursement ledger from Whitmore Property Services. The contractor had been paid for travel, materials, and 4 hours of work on the morning the flour was altered. Attached to the payment was the Reed and Rise property file. The purchase clause offered Charles the building below market value if a health suspension occurred before month's end. Charles looked toward the reporters, then away from their cameras. The city inspector closed the bakery's sanitation binder. "Reed and Rise meets current health requirements," she said. "The contaminated ingredient was isolated before production, reported properly, and preserved according to procedure. There is no basis for suspension." A breath left Rose's chest. Behind her, Ava reached for Lily's hand. Neither girl spoke. The attorney for the Monroe Foods board announced that Brent was suspended pending termination proceedings and referral for fraud and intellectual property theft. Susan's access to all company systems had already been revoked, and the forged signature and deleted records would be referred for independent investigation. Charles's property transaction was frozen while the city reviewed possible interference with an inspection and coordination with the contractor. The 12 disputed employee files would be reopened under outside supervision. No one applauded. The bakery became so quiet that the second hand of the wall clock sounded sharp, each tick landing between the people who had once believed a red folder more than the man standing in front of them. Metal inside the cooling oven contracted with a faint pop. Susan bent to gather the fallen pages, but her fingers trembled too badly to align them. Brent kept his eyes below the cameras. Charles no longer looked at the lease. Claire walked to the center table and placed her silver pen beside the red folder, the same pen she had held when she signed Marcus's termination. Lily stepped out from beside Rosa and looked up at her mother. "Did you read his warning before you fired him?" Claire's face changed, not dramatically, but enough for the entire room to see the answer before she spoke. "No," she said. "I signed before I verified it." She turned toward the reporters, then toward Marcus. "Marcus Reed did not fail our standards. We used our standards to hide our failure." Marcus did not smile. He did not look at Brent or Susan. He pulled a chair out for Rosa and asked the attorney to enter her name, Jamal's name, and the names of the 12 former employees into the public record. "The truth doesn't need me to make anyone smaller," he said. "It only needs room to remain standing." Claire announced that Marcus's termination would be formally withdrawn, his authorship restored and all unpaid royalties calculated. She offered him his former position back, along with control of the product division built around his recipe. Marcus looked through the glass partition toward Ava, still holding Lily's hand beneath the opening day photograph. The recognition he had once needed was finally sitting in front of him, backed by evidence no one could erase. He rested one flower-marked palm on the counter and said, "Before I answer, there is one condition, and it isn't about me." After the room had finally spoken his name correctly, what would Marcus choose to do with the power that came with it? The reporters left Reed and Rise more quietly than they had entered. Camera lights clicked off one by one. The city inspector carried the sealed flower evidence outside, and Charles Whitmore departed without looking at the building he had expected to buy. Brent and Susan were escorted to separate cars by company counsel, not in handcuffs and not beneath shouted insults, but under written suspension orders neither of them could dismiss with a polished explanation. Inside the bakery, the red personnel folder remained on the counter beside Claire's silver pen. "What is your condition?" Claire asked. Marcus looked through the glass partition. Ava was sitting beside Lily, showing her how to repair a torn pastry box with clear tape. Rosa stood close enough to help but far enough to let the girls solve the small problem themselves. "Open every file handled under Brent and Susan," Marcus said. "Independent review. Correct the records publicly. No one signs away the truth to receive what they are owed." Claire nodded once. "All 12. Anyone else the evidence leads to." "And your position?" "I'm not coming back." The words were quiet, but they changed the room. Claire had expected anger, perhaps a demand for control or a public role large enough to match the harm done to him. Marcus only rested his hand on the worn wooden counter he had sanded himself after Ava went to bed. "I spent 14 months teaching my daughter that losing a job did not make her father dishonest," he said. "I won't ask her to watch me return to the same building just because they finally admit my name belongs on the work." Claire did not try to persuade him. For the first time, she accepted his answer without treating it as a problem her position could solve. Monroe Foods formally withdrew Marcus's termination, restored his authorship, and issued written corrections to every agency and employer that had received the false safety record. The company calculated his unpaid royalties, covered his legal expenses, and paid compensation for the forged documents and wrongful dismissal. Marcus accepted what was legally owed, but the money did not become the ending. His condition did. An outside firm reviewed the 12 disputed terminations. 5 former workers received corrected employment histories. 3 recovered wages. Others were offered hearings without confidentiality agreements. Claire removed herself from termination decisions during the restructuring, surrendered her annual bonus, and placed disciplinary reviews under independent compliance oversight. She began reading every warning report that reached her desk. Brent was terminated for fraud, theft of intellectual property, and concealment of a safety risk. Susan was terminated for falsifying records and misusing protected signature files. Their conduct was referred to the appropriate investigators. Charles lost the purchase option on the building, and the city opened a review of his communications with contractors and the inspection office. Weeks later, Marcus used part of his settlement as a down payment, not on a larger house or a luxury car, but on a cooperative purchase of the Reed and Rise building with Rosa and 2 neighboring business owners. No single investor could threaten their doors again. The first program Marcus created was a paid bakery apprenticeship for single parents, scheduled around school drop-offs and pickups. On the morning the first class began, 6 clean brown aprons hung beneath the clock. Claire arrived with Lily wearing jeans and a plain sweater. She had not brought lawyers, photographers, or an investment proposal. She paid the community class fee at the register and waited in line. Marcus did not tell her that everything was forgiven. He showed her where to wash her hands and gave her the same printed instructions as everyone else. It was not absolution. It was a boundary with a door still visible inside it. Ava watched Claire measure flour, then leaned toward Marcus. "Are we rich now?" she whispered. Marcus looked at the parents tying aprons, at Rosa laughing beside the mixer, and at Jamal rolling fresh sacks through the rear entrance, each seal photographed before it crossed the kitchen line. "We're safe enough to hold the door open for somebody else," he said. That afternoon, the original recipe card was transferred to a secure legal archive, where no manager could remove it from history. Marcus framed a verified copy above the counter. The purple star remained torn. His wife's words remained faded. Beneath it, Ava hung the brass key she had raised on opening day. When the last class ended, no one hurried to fill the silence. Claire stood beside Lily. Rosa rested both hands on the back of her chair. Marcus checked the oven temperature, wiped the flour from his palms, and watched Ava turn the sign from closed to open for the evening crowd. The room was quiet, not because anyone had been defeated, but because everyone finally understood what had survived. Marcus opened the door for the first waiting parent, and the little brass key moved softly beneath the recipe card. Proof that dignity had never needed to shout. It had only needed the truth to remain standing long enough for kindness to become justice.